Hi, I'm Michael Stittle.
And I'm Nick Nanos.
Nick, we're back for another season of Trendline, where we release episodes every 2 weeks. You can find us on ctvnews.ca, wherever you find podcasts. And of course, if you want to check out the status of my houseplants in the background, you can also see us on YouTube.
Oh, that's not, that's a bit, that's a bit of a Charlie Brown plant. It looks a little sad.
Yeah, there's only one remaining from the previous season of Trendline. We'll see how this one does, but we'll hope for the best. So an exciting year ahead for us, Nick, with provincial elections. We've got Ontario and Quebec ahead. We've also got the US midterms. We're going to talk about Joe Biden's approval ratings later in the show. But first, all is not well on Parliament Hill. Why don't you tell us about the latest ballot tracking numbers?
Well, Michael, as you know, we track the ballot numbers every week, and when you look at the numbers, at least right now, we have the Conservatives mathematically, statistically tied, factoring the margin of error, but mathematically ahead by a smidgen at 28.5. They're down over 5 percentage points. The Liberals are at around 28.2. So statistical tie, factoring the margin of error between the Liberals and the Conservatives. Even the Liberals are down 4 percentage points or thereabouts. NDP at 24.3, up 6.5 percentage points. Even the Greens that had that really tough election, they're at 6% and they're up. BQ at 6 still, PPC at 5. But holy moly, guacamole, both of the front running parties under 30%. Both of the front running parties are down, and the NDP up. Like we've got, with the Conservatives at 28.5, the Liberals at 28.2, and the NDP at 24.3. It's basically a three-way race. We haven't seen a three-way race in quite a long time.
Yeah, that's rare. Now, how much of this has to do with the ongoing pandemic and the Omicron wave? Because you're also tracking the top issue of concern for Canadians. So where does that stand right now?
Well, when we ask Canadians what issues are on their mind, their top national issue of concern, check out the trend line. Coronavirus, 33%, but it's really a spike. It's been spiking in the last number of weeks. Healthcare, 11. So actually think about coronavirus as a health issue, healthcare as a health issue. That's 44% of Canadians. Environment at 9, jobs 7, deficit at 4. So what we're seeing is concern about the Omicron virus. And you know what, Michael, think of it this way. So I think for the Conservatives, the reason why they're probably down since the election is that there's a narrative or a perception that the Conservatives are divided. Aaron O'Toole has had issues managing his caucus. He's been trying to respond on mandatory vaccinations and who's got the jab, who doesn't have the jab, why can't they have the jab, that kind of stuff. And for the Liberals, they're down from the election right now too. And I think a lot of this has to do with, I think people basically being fatigued with the pandemic. The Liberals basically are proposing more of the same, right? More boosters, more PPEs, more support for Canadian. It's like, and I think Canadians are getting a little fatigued. But you know what? With the NDP at 24, this should be the dream scenario for the Conservatives. Like, come on, if the progressive vote gets split between the Liberals and the Conservative, between the Liberals and the New Democrats, that's good news for the Conservatives, good news for the NDP, bad news for the Liberals. So how about this for a question? Could Jagmeet Singh have a Jack Layton or Tom Mulcair moment where progressive voters drift from the Liberals, go to the NDP, and Jagmeet Singh, once again, the New Democrats become a significant force to be reckoned with? That's going to be the big thing to watch in 2022.
Nick, we're also seeing really high inflation numbers recently, which I suppose traditionally might, if it becomes a question of economic policy, the Conservatives traditionally have done quite well. What is the year ahead for these major parties with issues like that in mind?
Well, for the Conservatives, for Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives, for them realistically to have a shot at winning the next federal election, and it is a minority parliament, the first thing Aaron O'Toole has to do is to show that the Conservatives are united. Because, Michael, in my experience, it's very unusual for a party that is bickering publicly to be given power, because Canadians will go, I can't believe that they're voting for another party because, for example, There might be Canadians that want change.
Mhm.
They're looking at Aaron O'Toole, but then they're saying, why is there divisions? Why, if he can't manage his own caucus, let's face it, if a leader can't manage their own caucus, what
Hmm.
makes anyone think that they could lead the country? So for the Conservatives, the dominant thing that they have to first put to rest is unity behind their leader. If they don't do that, and for those Conservative caucus members that are upset, they've got to decide who's the real enemy. Is their enemy disappointment at Aaron O'Toole, or is their enemy the Liberals? And right now, the Conservatives, some are taking shots at their leader as opposed to focusing on the Conservatives. And for the Liberals, they've got to worry about fatigue with the government, that they pass their best before date, that they start looking like a tired government,
Hmm.
and that people just get fed up with the pandemic and want to punish someone, and the Liberals being at the front of the line on that front. So
So
those
on,
two parties.
yeah, on that note, how do the Liberals sort of re-energize themselves to voters?
Well, I'll tell you what all the parties have to do. The parties have to advance a strategy of permanent resilience, not like what we're going to do next week.
Hmm.
How do we make our workplaces permanent resilient? How do we make our schools and our education system permanent resilient? How do we make our healthcare system permanent resilient for the future? And because you know what, I think this whole uncertainty is a killer for all of the parties.
Hmm.
People want to know whether their kids can go to school and how they're going to be going to school. People want to know when they're going to go to work and how work will be and how they'll be safe. And so I would say that, for the Liberals and the Conservatives and the New Democrats, all of them should put forth, if they want to win, they've got to put forth a permanent resilience strategy for Canada so that our economy is stable. And but for the Liberals, they also have to show why they deserve another mandate and what's left in the Liberal plan that needs to be done.
Nick, it's a big year ahead for provincial politics, as we said at the top of the show. First in June, we've got the Ontario provincial election. Ontario Premier Doug Ford doesn't seem to be doing too well in the polls, and we saw a video of him digging out cars in a blizzard that hit recently. What was that about?
Well, the thing is, whether you love or don't love the Fords, they're the masters of retail politics, right? There's a reason why the Ford family has been so successful. Yes, they're controversial, but they have been successful, and they're very good at retail politics. And when Rob Ford was the mayor of Toronto, yes, he was imperfect like all mayors, but on the retail side, when there was a pothole to be filled or a problem that garbage wasn't picked up, he made sure that City Hall was responsive and accountable. And I think what we're seeing now is Doug Ford to tap into that, what I'll say, Ford franchise of being connected with average Ontarians, and being, it's kind of like, I don't know, did you ever see the cheesecake? The
Cheesecake video. I did see that. Yeah,
I watched the cheesecake video, and I'd like to say, full disclosure, I like cheesecake, so
I do too.
I was interested in the recipe, but stuff like that. Sometimes people tend to make fun and of politicians, the cheesecake video, the shoveling of the snow. But the fact of the matter is those are things that average people do. And I think the snow shoveling is indicative not just of the brand of the premier, but also that it is election season coming up. And TikTok, June will come faster than we think. And it's pretty clear that Doug Ford is going to be looking to build his image, especially with some of the polling numbers that show the Liberals, the provincial Liberals, much more competitive than they've ever been.
Speaking of, they've got a new leader in Stephen Del Duca. I mean, do you think that he can seize on this opportunity?
Well, it's a little early to tell because, to a certain extent, the provincial Liberals are a parking space for some of those disaffected voters that were supporting Doug Ford. But like all parties, what they have to do is to define his image. And hopefully if you're a Liberal strategist, for those Liberal strategists, they need to define his image before the New Democrats and the Conservatives define Del Duca. So it's a little early. It shows that there's potential for sure, but there is definitely risk and vulnerability in the Del Duca. And you know what? If you're Andrea Horwath, you got to be thinking, what needs to happen. She's
Hmm.
been a solid performer in at Queen's Park. She's led the party successfully, had a good last election, but just doesn't seem to have traction right now, where people are skipping over the New Democrats, even though they're the official opposition, and looking at the Liberals as an alternative to the Ford government.
I mean, Ontario has had an NDP government in the past, but that was a long time ago now. And yeah, we'll see. Nick, going over to Quebec, Quebec Premier Francois Legault, he's been riding really high in the polls lately, and he did a pretty bold move politically, I suppose, or maybe not. It was his proposed tax on people who refuse to get vaccinated, which he said it would put money into the healthcare system. How are his chances, do you think?
Well, his chances are quite strong. And, the thing is he's had double-digit advantage over all of the provincial parties in Quebec. And, his advantage, and one of the surveys that I saw, I think his advantage had dropped to 18 points, so like
Wow.
dropped to 18, like, come on, that's,
Yeah.
it's still a massive win for Legault and the
Mm.
CAQ party. So, but, what's interesting is that, we've seen other leaders in other countries like Macron saying, he wants to piss off.
Hmm.
He said it in French, but he wants
Yeah.
to piss off, people that are unvaccinated. We have other European countries that are putting levies on people that refuse to get vaccinated. And what we see is Legault kind of going into this space of having a fine/tax. He won't say the T word, but a levy, he's been calling
Hmm.
it. We'll have a health levy on people that decide that they don't want to get vaccinated and don't have a valid reason. And I think a lot of this has to do, so think of it this way. We talked about the federal Liberals. They've been just saying the same stuff on the pandemic,
Hmm.
right? And people are like, okay, I've heard this all. Tell me what new things that you're going to do. I see Legault's move, even though he has a massive advantage in the polls, as a way for him to show that he's doing something else, something new to continue to fight the pandemic.
Mm.
And that's why I don't think there's a big political downside for him on this front, because what Canadians and voters want to hear from all of their elected officials is like, yeah, we get vaccinated, we wear masks, we get socially distanced, we lock down the economy. Tell me something else that we could do to try to fight this, to give hope to people that this can be controlled and put to an end. So for Legault, I think that's part of his strategy, to look proactive and to do something new.
Hmm. And I noticed that the Trudeau government has sort of taken a hands-off approach to this when asked if they would potentially, intervene in Quebec doing this.
Yeah, I think a lot of this has to do with, a lot of, and can I tell you something, Michael? A lot of the federal party leaders, or most of the federal party leaders, usually do not want to interfere in politics in Quebec, because that's like the kiss o' death,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Meddling in provincial affairs in Quebec or in other provinces.
Mm.
So they're going to steer clear of that, just because, Quebec's going to be a key battleground for all of the federal parties. And Quebec could basically make or break the party that could win the election, and whether they could even have a chance to form a majority government.
Nick, let's take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to look at Joe Biden's approval numbers and see if he's in trouble with the midterms this year. Nick, so this year is also the US midterms. It looks like Joe Biden's latest approval numbers are out. Where does he stand?
Not that great, Michael. When we look at the trend line, the Ipsos Reuters trend line, where they measure presidential approval ratings every week, you can see the trend line right now. 50% of Americans disapprove of his performance as president, 45% approve. And to put this in the context, when you look at the beginning of the trend line, which starts when he started off as president a year ago, his approval rate was at 55 and disapproval was at 32. So you're basically seeing it, not just an inversion, but, just a significant negative trend. And, the guy's in trouble. Why don't we just say that? The thing is people did for a lot of voters, they're happy to see Trump leave. There are other voters that wanted him to win and still believe that he won the election. But, if people think that things were going to change, this looks very similar. These numbers, Michael, are, believe it or not, eerily similar to Trump's approval rating at a similar point in the Trump administration. So Joe Biden is not politically taller than Donald Trump. And if we thought that Donald Trump wasn't doing well, you know what? Biden's numbers are comparable to Trump's numbers at the same point in their mandate.
That's amazing. So if the Republicans are able to take back control of, let's say, at least one of the houses in Congress, how much control does Donald Trump still have on that party? And potentially in 2024, could we see Donald Trump make another run for the White House?
Yep. This is a podcast. I should say more than that. Yes. Will Donald Trump be the nominee? Actually, it's up to Donald Trump to decide whether he wants to be the nominee. But if we look at what he has been doing in over the last year, he has basically been systematically attempting to purge any dissent in the party, to purge any opposition to his leadership as the past nominee and the past Republican president, and even in a lot of these states, at the state level, he's been looking at getting, I'll call it Trump-friendly Republicans in key positions in a lot of the states and the state machinery. So I'll put this on the table. He'll decide whether he wants to be the nominee. I would hazard to say that if he decides to be the nominee, he will be the nominee. And I'd also say that when you start crunching out these numbers in the Electoral College, he can win. He can defeat, especially if it's him against Biden. And so Donald Trump coming back should not be dismissed, and is a possibility because he is setting the stage for that. And a Donald Trump win in the Electoral College, not in the popular vote, but in the Electoral College, should not be dismissed either.
I think this is pretty amazing to some of us who are watching the January 6th investigation into the Capitol Hill riots, and America's just still so divided, and Trump has so many loyal supporters. I guess a bigger question for Canadians, though, is how would this impact Canada if we saw another Donald Trump presidency, and really, has Joe Biden's presidency been any better for us?
Well, what we've seen, at least in the first year of the Biden presidency, is a significant focus for Joe Biden. And let's face it, he's the president of the United States. He's focused on domestic politics and domestic issues. That's usually bad for other countries when America focuses on domestic political priorities. But the key thing here, you were talking about whether Donald Trump would be any good for Canada, or even if Joe Biden has been good for Canada. The key thing strategically here is that both of those individuals, actually, why don't we just say both of the parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, are actually chasing after the same voter, Midwestern men, right? Middle-aged and older men, blue collar. And the Democrats need those voters in order to hold on to power. The Republicans need those voters in order to get to power. And, these individuals are more likely to be more focused on an America First policy, more focused on protecting jobs in America. And as a result, I would hazard to say that the binational relationship between Canada and the United States, I think the risk is not who the president is. The risk is who the voters are that whoever is president will need to keep happy in order to stay in power. And right now, those Midwestern blue collar male voters, and their focus on putting American interests first and not being as global as other types of voters, is a risk to the binational relationship.
Nick, thanks very much. I think we should leave it there. We will be back, of course, in 2 weeks. Thanks to everyone for listening and watching.
Yeah, and Michael, don't forget to water your plant.
I will do that, Nick. All right.
Okay.
See you in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.